Hey there, and welcome back to the VEX IQ Guide. In today's video, we're going to be taking a look at spacers and washers. Spacers and washers are great for reducing friction in your builds and filling in gaps that you couldn't fill otherwise. Let's take a look. Here we have a spacer and a washer. While it's a bit hard to tell from this image, the spacer is a bit thick while the washer is very thin. Spacers and washers are both circular objects with a hole in the middle, as seen here. Let's take a look at how spacers can be applied in a build. We're going to build a small contraption where we can see how several spacers, and a couple washers as well, are able to create enough space for the gear to be properly positioned. Firstly, we're going to place 2 spacers on the shaft. Then, we're going to place the gear on as shown. Finally, we're going to be putting 4 more spacers onto the shaft, as you can see here in this video. Now, once those spacers are on, putting another spacer on would be too much space. So now we can put washers on to fill in the rest of the gap. We're going to place a couple washers on just so we have enough space, and then finally attach the beam to complete the build. Now let's see how washers can be used in a build. As you can see in this mechanism right here, when we spin the gear on the beam, we can hear a lot of resistance because of the friction between the beam and the gear. However, we can take this away by adding a washer into the mechanism. We're going to take off the gear and the spacer, place the washer here as shown, and then place the gear and the shaft collar back on the mechanism. Once we do this, you'll see that once we spin the gear, as shown here, we no longer have the friction and all the resistance between the gear and the beam is now gone. You may be wondering whether you should use a washer or a spacer in any given circumstance. Let's go over a few quick tips on how you can figure out what the right choice is. Firstly, if your only goal is to reduce friction between a moving and a non-moving object, for example, a shaft collar and a beam, or a gear and a beam, or really any other part that moves on a shaft and a beam, a washer is generally your best bet. This is because it's really small in space, but it will still get the job done when reducing friction. Now, let's say you have a gap that you need to fill on a shaft, but a shaft collar won't quite cut it. In this case, spacers are generally your best bet, especially if you need to cover a long distance. It would take a high amount of washers to fill a big gap, but spacers can do the job pretty quickly. Now, let's say you run into a situation where 2 spacers might not be enough, but 3 spacers might be too much to fill a gap. You can definitely combine spacers and washers to fill in that gap. For example, using 2 spacers and 1 or more washers to fill in that gap that we just mentioned earlier. That's just about it for today on spacers and washers. Remember that these parts are essential and they have a variety of purposes, so be sure to use them a ton when you're building in VEX. If you found this video helpful, consider liking it and subscribing to the channel for more content like this. See you in the next one.